The Conservatives say they'd save £47 billion of taxpayers' money by cutting spending on foreign aid, social housing, welfare, including a policy to restrict benefits to British citizens.
The Shadow Chancellor, Sir Mel Stride, unveils the plans in his speech at conference today and joins us now from Manchester. Very good morning to you, Sir Mel Stride. I just want to ask, how do you deal with the fact that you have a legacy of very high taxes and very high immigration?
So let's take the immigration point first. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that it was totally unsatisfactory that at the end of our term in office we got to a net migration figure of around 900,000. As to the tax point, taxes have been rising for some time, and part of that, of course, was a direct result of the COVID pandemic and the costs and the money that we had to spend to support the economy, quite rightly, in my view, at that time. That's not a free lunch, that has to be paid back. But where we are now, Susanna, is we're in a position where debt and the servicing costs of that debt and the deficit are at levels that are very unsustainable. We're in a very fragile situation, and what we're saying as a party, and what I'll be saying in my speech today, is we have to take those grown-up decisions around controlling spending if we're going to get on top of that debt and have a sustainable economy.
So I just wonder how long your party needs to be able to sort of come through the legacy that you left behind, the 14 years, the huge loss at the last general election, in order to appeal to people who don't think you're credible on those two key issues, the economy and immigration.
Well, on the economy, I think it's really important that we make our case very firmly for living within our means, being the adults in the room when it comes to that conversation, and I'll be saying a number of things today exactly about that. Now, we do that, Susanna, in the face of a Labour Party who are palpably failing to manage the economy appropriately, and I won't go into all the detail because I think we know it, and a Reform Party who are dealing in fantasy economics, so they're prepared to promise anything that they think people want to hear without a clear and rigorous plan as to how they're going to fund those promises or indeed deliver them. And in that environment, I think there is an opportunity for the Conservative Party to make a strong case to the country. Now, this conference is part of that process, and clearly it will take time after what was a devastating loss at the last election to get that cut through, but I believe through time that we can do it. On the issue of net migration and illegal migration, absolutely. We didn't, when we were in office, get the boats under control as we said that we would, and we've made it very clear that that was not a good outcome. However, we are under new leadership, and we have just recently made some very important announcements around withdrawing from the ECHR and the Human Rights Act in the UK here as well, as a means, amongst other measures, to make it very clear to the public that we are absolutely serious on getting on top of illegal migration in our country. Okay. And I think that message will cut through, but it will take time.
Mel Stride, I probably more than anyone understand how hard it is to be the Shadow Chancellor in the first and second year of a parliament when your party's been thrown out of power after 14 years. It's really hard. This is a very difficult speech you're making today. How much time do you spend explaining what went wrong? How much time do you spend apologising for the past? At what point can you say, I've done enough of that and I can move on to the future? Because the problem is, if you don't acknowledge the problems in the past, very hard to get people to listen to you about today and tomorrow.
Yeah, well, Ed, thanks for that. So I have, on the economy and the mini-budget in 2022, back end of then, made it very clear that mistakes were made. And in fact, I made a speech at the Royal Society of Arts some months back now, acknowledging that. I called it out, actually, at the time. I was chair of the Treasury Select Committee, and made a very clear statement that this party, my party, will never, ever make that mistake again. We are the party of fiscal responsibility, and today is about making it clear that there's a clear down payment on that in setting out some clear, categorical, unequivocal savings that we have thought through fully and believe that we can deliver. As to how long it will take, Ed, well, these things do take time. But what I'm absolutely certain of is we've got 4 years to the next general election, and there will certainly come a point, and you're seeing it in the polls actually on the economy, where the Conservative Party is beginning to edge a lead over other parties, certainly the Labour Party. So I think we will cut through ultimately.
Let's ask you about some of the details of what you are announcing in policy. I'll ask you first about overseas aid. Part of your £47 billion of savings is a big cut in overseas aid. You're going to cut it to 0.1% of our overall economy. When David Cameron was trying to show the Conservatives have changed, he said he was going to increase it to 0.7. You're going to cut it to 0.1. That's the lowest level it's been since the 1960s when records began. It would be lower than any other G7 country, lower than any other European country other than Cyprus. I think only Russia would spend less on international aid than the next Conservative government if your plans come through. What does it say about the Conservative Party that you want to be the Chancellor of, that you would have a lower level of international aid spending than any other country pretty much in the developed world?
What it speaks to, Ed, is the position that we are in as an economy. We are living on borrowed time. And unless we have a government that recognises that and takes these tough decisions and gets on top of the size of government and spending, including overseas aid, then we will end up in a very, very difficult position. And you will know as an economist and former Shadow Chancellor that the OBR comes up with all sorts of forecasts as to where the economy is heading over the coming decades. And that line in terms of debt to GDP ratio is spiralling ever upwards and needs to be arrested, because there is a point on that journey at which the wheels of this economy will completely come off. And that will not help anybody around the world if Britain becomes impoverished, bankrupt and unable to further its values across the globe. So yes, these are tough decisions, I accept that, but they are the right ones.
Is Kemi Badenoch the right leader for the Conservative Party?
Yes, definitely. If you'd been in the hall, Susanna, yesterday when she gave her speech, an excellent speech, standing ovation at the beginning, standing ovation at the end. Look, it's tough being leader of the opposition. I think Ed said it's tough being Shadow Chancellor. It's far, far tougher to be the leader of the opposition at this stage. We have to stay the course. We have to hold our nerve. At this conference, nobody will be able to say at the end of this conference that they do not know what the Conservative Party stands for, that the Conservative Party, people have said, don't have any policies. Well, we've been very clear, and I'm discussing some of those on the economic side with you now, and we've made big announcements around net migration and illegal migration as well. And she is leading us through that, and she is resilient. The biggest thing she needs is resilient, and this is a very resilient lady.
Does she need to be resilient to Robert Jenrick's attempts to be leader? Do you think, I mean, he keeps telling everybody stop asking him, it's very boring, but behind the scenes, apparently, his supporters would quite like him to take over from Kemi Badenoch. Do you ever have conversations with Robert Jenrick about his leadership ambitions?
No, absolutely not. Look, if anybody thinks that changing leaders, which is something that the Conservative Party has done many times in the recent period, is the answer to the challenge of getting back into office, then they're deeply deluded. The last thing the public wants to see between now and the general election is yet another upheaval within the Conservative Party in which we search for another leader. The things that are holding us back are that we ended up in a difficult position. We've got to show that through our principles, our policies, and sticking and holding our nerve, that we can come through. And that's what Kemi is leading us in that way.
And finally, before we let you go, were you upset when you saw the front page of the brochure for this year's party conference? Stronger economy, stronger borders. Where is the photograph of the Shadow Chancellor, Sir Mel Stride, in that lineup?
He's been airbrushed out.
No, Ed, he had not been airbrushed out, but he wasn't there, that is true, because the Shadow Chancellor was in the United States, in Nashville, having a meeting with Arthur Laffer, the economist who has dedicated his life to getting taxes down and lower and making the arguments about how that can power growth in economies, and I was over there to discuss that with him because I want to get our taxes down, and that's why I'm afraid that was more important to me than being in a photograph.
Arthur Laffer was in London just a couple of weeks ago. You could have seen him in London. You went all the way to Nashville. Were you avoiding the photo?
No, not at all, because I went from Nashville over to California to meet with venture capitalists, to meet with Google, to meet with Condoleezza Rice and others in order to talk about some of the kind of opportunities that there are for our economy that are booming in the States, particularly in Silicon Valley. So it was part of an overall trip. So no attempt to avoid the photograph.
I think it's a little unfortunate that when stronger economy is one of the main catchphrases of the conference, they can't put the Shadow Chancellor in. In fact, there's even a gap in the top right where you could have been airbrushed in. But Sir Mel Stride, we're glad you made an appearance on our programme this morning.
As always.
Thanks very much indeed. Good to see you.
You can't blame Mel for not being on our programme, ever.
Indeed.